Hey, thanks for joining me. How many of you remember these? I'm really kind of curious to how many people are actually aware of the existence of these things because nobody talks about them. And there's probably good reason, but basically everyone, obviously, if you're watching this channel, most of you are here because you see me covering mostly, 90s era comics and a lot of the Image comic stuff. Everyone knows about Image Comics. Everyone knows about Jae Lee. Everyone just thought he was the neatest thing back in the 90s when he got going. He was drawing Namor and did some Spider-Man work, and he did some X-Men, X-Factor work. Just a really crazy, dark, I don't know, kind of like this monstrous, demonic-looking kind of style. I don't know how else to describe it. And then he come over to Image Comics and drew 3-issue Wildcats trilogy miniseries for Jae Lee, and he did some stuff for Rob Liefeld, Youngblood, something. It was all about Chapel and things like that. I've reviewed all of those. Everyone really liked his work. Jae Lee had this incredibly different work, his art style that was kind of like a Bill Sienkiewicz. I don't even know what else to mention as far as what he might be mixed with, but if you know what Jae Lee's work was like and why we all really enjoyed him. And so, he was at Marvel, and then they brought him over to Image to do some work for, Jae Lee and Liefeld and things like that. And then he got the opportunity to do his own series for Image Comics. He did Hellshock. That is volume 1. And I've already reviewed that on my channel, and at this point it's probably a year old. And that is one of the most beautifully drawn but poorly conceived comics ever. Like, the first issue was only, I feel like it was like 10 pages long, and then some abandoned pages in the back and some sketches, something like that. It's been a long time since I looked at it, but the artwork was amazing, but the first issue was so small in terms of story content. And then it went on for 3 more issues, and I can't remember what kind of delay time frame happened in between issues. I don't seem to remember that there were huge delays in it. There might have been. Maybe, if you remember otherwise, feel free to mention in the comments. But it kind of went nowhere. There's this guy, the main character, Hellshock, the lead guy with this like red cross kind of thing painted on his face. Big, long, black hair. There was an obvious, it looked very similar to like The Crow. Like the James O'Barr thing, like a dark gothic character, religious ties, religious implications, face painted up, unkillable superhero guy fighting demonic monsters. If you read the book, I would struggle. I would be really curious if any of you who read it actually remember the details of the story, because it's not that great. And nor was it, I think, the best work Jae Lee ever did. It was good, and in places it was really good, but it just wasn't amazing. And Jae Lee would agree with you. He says that as much. We'll get into that inside this book 1 here in just a minute. But he took some time and wanted to do it right. He wanted to get this amazing opportunity that he had and do it the best way that it should be done. And so after volume 1, I think a 2-year difference in time from volume 1 to volume 2, which is what we've got here. So, and Jae Lee gives some, there's a page in the back of book 1 and book 3 where he talks about his thoughts on everything. And we're going to get into those in just short order. But to start out, so let's put books 2 and 3 off to the side for a minute. Just starting out, this cover is so goddamn good. The composition, the lighting, the figure rendering, the colors. Holy Lord, the colors. Jose Villarrubia. Man, did these guys have something that was just amazing. This book artistically is miles above the original miniseries, and in my opinion, some of the best stuff, if not the best stuff that Jae Lee ever did. But there is a huge but. The but being, Jae Lee, I think, based on what he says in book 1 here and then at the end of book 3, I feel kind of bad for the man, because he had that opportunity for Image Comics. I'm sure he got paid really good money, and then he got the opportunity to do his own book, and he didn't particularly care for how it turned out. So he was going to focus, research, and produce the best thing he could ever possibly do. He was going to earn his name. He was going to earn respect. He was going to make a book that was something he can be proud of. So let me flip this open to the back where he talks in here. I'm not going to read all of this, but this is what Jae Lee has to say. He says, "This is it. This is Hellshock the way it was meant to be. You may wonder how it is different from what was before. If you have finished reading this issue, you will already have an idea of how Hellshock as a concept has changed, or more accurately, grown. But get ready, because there is much more to come. The characters you've met, or in Daniel's case, reacquainted yourselves with in this issue, will embark on a journey of epic proportions. In upcoming issues, you will learn Daniel's true origin as he unveils the mysteries of the Nephilim, I don't know what that is, and the nature of his messianic destiny. Don't be deceived by the relative calmness of this first issue." Yeah, we'll get into that. As the story progresses, you will be witness to a conflict of cataclysmic dimensions where acts of great cruelty will be committed, and also acts of great kindness. Expect more realism like you saw in this issue, but also more of the supernatural as the mysteries of ancient writings that were deemed too dangerous to be part of the official Bible are revealed to Daniel. So that's in the first paragraph. So Jae Lee has big aspirations for this. He has big plans. He says here, why didn't the story start here in the first issue of the miniseries? Well, think of the miniseries as a creature that was born prematurely and consequently not fully formed. When, 2 years ago, I was given the opportunity to create my own character, I was full of ideas and enthusiasm, but I lacked any experience in writing. I knew that I wanted to move away from the superhero genre that I had been drawing. My work was becoming darker and darker, and not just because I use a lot of ink. So a supernatural mystery horror book was the natural choice for me. But I didn't have the time to think the concepts through, and the execution of that first story was rushed and unresolved. Now I have taken my time. For the last 2 years, I have been researching all the background elements that I want to include into the story, as well as plotting a story arc that will last approximately the first 12 issues of the series. You may think this sounds overly ambitious, and it might be, but I think the story I concocted deserves the room to be fully explored. So, he's flat out admitting he was excited, but he didn't have the experience, and the original Hellshock miniseries was kind of a mess, like so many of those early Image books. He also says here, you might have also noticed a change in the art. I'm trying a more realistic approach than even before. Storytelling, settings, lightings, and facial and gestural expressions are more important to me than ever. I want this drama to be performed by great actors and in great settings, and not by generic figures in ambiguous spaces. Mr. Liefeld. In this issue, you can also see painted colors by Jose Villarrubia. I think they add the right mood for the story. I also have a new logo by David Plunker. David is amongst the hottest graphic artists in so he goes on to thank the guy who created the logo and the lettering and the coloring and the computer effects and the computer coloring. So, he shouts out everybody there. At the end here, he says, how does it all fit with the Hellshock miniseries? The events in this issue take place before that story. There will be some changes in the story that was told in the miniseries, and a much bigger picture will be shown, where Daniel, Jonakand, Isabel, and Christina become players in the cosmic struggle between good and evil that is now Hellshock. I want to thank you, readers, for joining me on this journey. You're in for the ride of your life. Oh, and will it be monthly? Absolutely, Jae Lee. So, Jae Lee has all the good intentions and best ideas and all the hopes and dreams of anybody who's been given an incredible opportunity. I've never had a problem with Jae Lee on any level. He never gets involved in any controversy that I'm ever aware of. He's a guy that just draws some awesome, awesome stuff. I wish he drew, still to this day, a little bit more the way he drew back in the day like this, but that's just a little personal opinion. But, so, what happens in this book? Well, first off, I don't know if you can tell, it is huge. Like, it is a thick book. I think I got a page count of 43 pages. So it's like a double-sized first issue. So I can't stress enough how much I love this cover. It looks so good. I love the coloring on it. So we start out, written and illustrated by Jae Lee, painted by Jose Villarrubia. And then there are, so Villarrubia, I think, watercolors it. And then other people come along and, I don't know, scan it into a computer and then do whatever they do to make it the finished colored version. It looks pretty damn amazing. Although, I will say, in doing a little research before I started filming this video, I went online and looked and I saw a ton of these pages from just, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago, of all these original pages at heritage auctions up for sale, like the entirety of book 1 for like $3,000 or something like that, if I remember what I saw right. At least when it was initially announced. I don't know what they ever actually sold for. But it has all these pages in black and white. And oh my God, does Jae Lee's work in black and white work so well. I'm actually, once I saw those pages on my phone, I am going to, sometime here soon, go see if I can go onto the Heritage Auctions website. And I believe, I understand, they usually have high-resolution scans of those original pages. And if they do, I'm going to save them. I'm going to take them to FedEx, and I'm going to have them print them out on 11 by 17 paper so I can have them as like just copies of his black and white artwork. They look so goddamn good. In a way, almost better than the colored versions. And these colored versions look incredible. So if I get to do that, I'll do a separate video on that. But, so now we're into Hellshock. So this is where the struggle starts. I like Jae Lee. I like his art. I love the thing that he wrote. I love his intentions. He wants to make a great book that stands the test of time, that is researched and thoughtful and interesting. And he did everything I imagine a person could do that's right, and he fucked it up in every way possible. That's harsh. What the hell am I talking about? Can I do better? What could be so bad? Well, I know, not exactly from personal experience. If you follow my channel, you know that I do my own, I'm an amateur comic book artist. I'm an enthusiastic amateur. And I do draw and write my own stuff. So I have some idea of what it's like to create a book. And one of the things that stuck with me forever is I remember reading an interview, I think with Jae Lee, saying that first issues are hard because you have to, in a very limited space, introduce everything. The characters, the plot, the motivations, set up everything in a very limited amount of space. And it's all about kind of being economic with your storytelling to tell the important things that you need to tell the reader, but also make it interesting to keep people coming back to it. So when you think of Jae Lee's art and some of the shit that he's done that you've seen before this, you might think of big, crazy, monstrous images like the Youngblood series that he did, those 3 issues with Chapel and Al Simmons, and it's just monstrous looking figures and big crazy demonic creatures and guns and blood and ink splatters, or the stuff he did over on Namor, or those Spider-Man Iron Fist crossover issues, the Wildcats trilogy with all kinds of action and fighting. I think that most of us would be like, that's what I expect to see, especially from Image Comics in 97. This is January of 97 is issue 1. So what is in this book? I I feel bad gonna say negative things about this, but the entire book is people talking, 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 talking. It's a story about a woman who is a young, enthusiastic doctor working in a psychiatric ward that happens to look like a ancient like castle in like a horror movie. The setting is really weird. I mean, I get from like a theatrical and visual kind of standpoint, the setting is beautiful as far as visuals, but they don't keep mentally ill psychiatric patients in a place that looks like an ancient dungeon. But this is the girl, Christina is her name, and there are so many words. They fill up this thing with so much text. It goes on and on and on in the worst way that's kind of like when I bitch about McFarlane's Spawn comics. With the exception that I have read this and it's relatively interesting. You know, I can tell that Jae Lee really did his research and he is putting, I feel like he's probably talked to people, spoke with psychiatrists and doctors about how processes are done, what people would do in these situations, why the mentally ill are in places the way they are, why they are the way they are. It's not a bad read. It just goes on for 43 fucking pages. No action, no adventure, nothing. It just doesn't fucking stop. And so I can respect it. Jae Lee's trying to do something different. But when you're reading Jae Lee Hellshock from Image Comics, I feel like that's the wrong thing to do. It might fly in the face of what you want to do, like your own personal work, and you should do the kind of work that you want to do. But I think there's a point where you have to consider the audience and what is it that, you know, on the Cartoonist Kayfabe channel, Ed Piskor, rest in peace, buddy, used to say, as a quote that he heard from somebody else, dumb it down for your audience, double your dollars, something like that. Like, I hate to suggest that you dumb down the beautiful work you're trying to do for a stupid audience who wants to see giant heroes punching monsters and girls with hot asses and tits jumping around looking hot. But you got to do something to keep it interesting. This, I mean, maybe he's trying to do like a Vertigo kind of Sandman type thoughtful deconstruction of the human condition. I don't know what Jae Lee's thoughts were, except that he was trying to make something beautiful. Now look at this artwork. Oh my God, is it good? The figures, the compositions, the coloring. Still, like I said, the black and white of these that I saw are so good. It's I can't wait to, I hope I can find copies of those in high enough resolution. I'll print them out. I want to share them just to look at Jae Lee's black and white artwork. But this is visually, at the time, the best thing he's ever drawn. And he's not drawing superheroes fighting each other. It's just so well done. But holy shit, can we do more than 43 pages of nothing but this? So maybe I'm a jerk off. Maybe I don't get it. Maybe I'm dumb, you know. But it's like, you gotta find a balance of some kind of exciting something to keep the kids coming back. In 97, I was 19, maybe 20 years old. So, you know, it's not like I'm a 12 or 13-year-old kid like when I first started collecting comics, but I tend to just only look at this for the art and the story. You're just like, God, I can't, if I read this once, I'm not reading this ever again. Never again am I going to read this. But the basic concept is this girl's coming to this psych ward. This is her boss. She's got coworkers, and the place is just filled with mentally ill people suffering. And she's young and youthful and excited, and she wants to help. She wants to help cure the world, heal the world. And so it's a lot of internal thoughts of her talking about all the horrible things that she's seeing, how she's trying to help, how she's learning from the old tired guys that have been living in the system, working there, trying to like get her to understand, I know that you're young and excited and you want to help, but there are certain realities to this world that are just, it's not realistic for you to want to do what you think you're going to do. But she's going to hold on to her hope. And so it all makes sense, but it just keeps going. More internal monologue, and it gets into some real human stuff about this person had this happen to him. This is a drug-addicted person. This person's parents ignored them. This poor man, this old guy who basically is just homeless and has nowhere to go, so he'll fake being mentally ill so he could get admitted to the hospital so they can give him a bed and food so he can live another day. And so he starts making up things. He's like, they tell me to do things I don't want to, like to steal things. And then he stops and he realizes that the girl who's interviewing him, she could see through it. She could tell he's faking it. And he just quietly says in this beautifully rendered panel, look at the face in this bottom panel. Holy shit, is that good? And he just says to her, please, it's so cold out there. So like this poor old man is just lying his way into a place with a bed and food because he doesn't want to be on the streets. So, and then there's limited space and limited resources. So this place, this psych ward or whatever that they're in, they can't take everybody in. So they have to vet them. They have to choose who can come and who can go. And if you're basically mentally competent, you're on the streets. If you're mentally ill and a danger to yourself or society, you get to come inside. And that's the reality. I've worked in the homeless program here in my local state. I did 5 years in there, and I've got 2 brothers. My younger brother, John, and my older brother. They're both still basically working in that kind of world. Been there for 20, 25 years. You know, it's hard. And I feel like Jae Lee did his research. But it just won't stop with the boring talking. The girl's getting a drink. She's talking to some other of her coworkers. They're kind of making each other laugh. They see some of the dark stuff they have to go through. It just keeps going. Beautiful artwork, words everywhere. It's just... I know it's probably dumb. There's probably some of you out there like, here's this dumbass Rob who's like, doesn't like to read comics that have a lot of words. Well, comics are a visual medium, and I feel like you need to strike a balance. I talk about this all the time. Yes, I want a good story. The best comics I've ever read are not necessarily the ones with the best art. It's the ones with at least good art, maybe not the best art I've ever seen, but at least good art combined with a great story, and the entirety of the package sticks with you. But then there are those books where you're just like, oh, I read it. The story was stupid. It was boring. It was cliche. It was childish garbage, but the artwork was amazing. So all I remember is the art. But the best stuff is when the story and the art come together. And God, if Jae Lee got paid by the word, you know, he's a millionaire. So more guys that are suffering and ripping their own guts out, and she's trying to deal with it. The fantastic coloring. I love these panels. The coloring on this face right there. So good. So, but how many pages have I flipped by? And there's still just people sitting around talking. Better drawn than anybody else could do. You know, arguably, but character building, it's an honorable, good thing to try to accomplish, right? Like, you want to have good characters. Like he said in the beginning of the book, he's like, I want these stories to be told by great actors. Meaning he wants to have gestures and facial expressions and body language be just emoting from his figures. And he does that. And he wants the settings to be believable and real. He wants us to be like a great movie that you're watching, for example. It's so important to Jae Lee that this thing be good. And he tried so hard, but you know, there's such a thing as you try so hard that you completely miss the obvious. I think that's just my opinion. But words and words and words. But then she runs into this guy, Daniel. This is Hellshock. Remember the guy who looked like the Crow with like the leather pants and the boots and the long hair and was fighting demon monsters in the original miniseries? Here he is. He's in the mental hospital with the short hair, and he's quiet and catatonic, and she can't figure him out. Something's different about him. So the idea of what Daniel, Hellshock, what he is and what he will become is what kept me invested in to continue reading this long-ass freaking novel. Like, when is he going to come out of this? What are we going to get to see from this guy? Here he is. He talks about... he gets into some philosophical discussions with her that intrigue her about... he's not a dumb guy. He's got some things to say. He's got some thoughts to express. And so she's kind of intrigued by the mystery of this guy. Okay, that's great. But we're still sitting around talking. And so we get to this point, and they're talking, and she's getting a little bit closer to him than she probably should. Believe me, you're supposed to maintain a professional distance. But then it stops. All right, is this the end of the book? All right, how to color comics the Villarrubia way. And this is, you know, Jose Villarrubia talking about how he does his coloring. It's pretty interesting how you take this original black and white drawing, which looks incredible. Look at Jae Lee's work there. God damn, is that good. And then they come along and I guess watercolor over it. That's just a pinup of things to come. Great pinup. Like, that looks exciting. Man, is his drawing amazing. Everything there looks good. There's sexy, there's creepy, there's weird. You know, that's going to be neat. But the how to color, there's the line work, there's some watercoloring, and then they do some digital effects on top of it to come up with the final result. There again is a little tiny little page in the black and white. I remember staring at this going, God, I wish this thing was, I want to see this black and white. But no, that wasn't the end of the book. They just, right in the middle of the book, here's a how to color. All right, well, we're going to keep going. So the characters are still sitting around talking, discussing, and her internal monologue that goes on and on and on and on and on. And she's still fascinated with this Daniel guy. He's on the ground. He's taking his clothes off. He's having a mental break. Something's weird. He's not having a good time. So she's trying to break through to him because, again, she sees something special in him. And, you know, they start asking questions. Like he asks, well, tell me then, what is real? Which feels like a conversation from the Matrix. What is real? She says, what do you mean what's real? I'm real. You're real. He says, how do you know? She's like, well, for starters, I can see and hear you. He says, what if you were blind and deaf? Well, I might not know you're in the room, but you'd still be there. So he's like, what if someone told you the room was empty? So they're having these conversations about what's real and what's... you know, it's kind of an interesting conversation, but they go on. And then here's Daniel walking around, glowing light behind his head. She's fascinated with him. We're back with the guy who was pretending to be mentally ill so he could have a place to stay. But after a couple of days, he's forced back out onto the street, and he's pissed, and she feels bad because she has to eject him out onto the streets. She feels terrible. And so the girl, Christine, is back talking with Daniel. Again, look at the color change, the color palette going on, these glowing highlights on these figures. God, Jae Lee was putting everything into this. So she takes the guy out onto the roof of the building so we could see the night sky. And so then we get into some artwork that's just pencil. I've actually, when I was looking up the black and white originals, I remember seeing these pages. They're just pencil that looks like they're kind of airbrushed over. I don't know if that's exactly true, but I would suspect it is. But they're on the roof, and she's having a connection with them, and then another pencil drawing with wild coloring. Some great art, great pencils, great sketchiness, moody, evocative. Like all the Image guys wishes that they could draw and have the kind of emotion and style that Jae Lee does. They all wish that they could do this. Very few of them. Like, in my opinion, Mark Silvestri is the only one who can give Jae Lee a run for his money that might be better. But Jae Lee's better than all the rest of them when he's trying. But we're back. She's sitting around. She's talking. She's interviewing more people who are coming into the psych ward, talking about how he sold his kids for crack. It just, all right, the world is horrible. She's getting more and more jaded. She's losing her faith. She needs something to believe in. The world is turning to lunacy, it says. So they're still sitting around talking, and then it ends with her going to see Daniel. He's in a room, and he's just kind of quietly there. He's got his hands up to his mouth, and he moves his hands over as if to give her something, like there's something small and precious in his hands. And she just, you don't see what it is, you just see her reaction, her feeling. It just affects her profoundly. She has this great kind of cathartic release of emotion and feeling, and it says, the emotions were overwhelming. It was like stretching back to my childhood. I felt my mother's love, my father's indifference. I went through all the pain of my patience. I cried and cried it all out. It was such an incredible, cleansing, cathartic experience. It was Daniel's way of saying thank you. So Daniel, the guy who we know as Hellshock, was some kind of like otherworldly, spiritual kind of connection, gave her some kind of gift that just gave her an emotional release that made her feel better about life and existence. Great watercoloring going on in this figure. And then that's the end of book 1. So, holy shit. Okay. I remember reading this going like, I can tell this guy's really trying, and maybe I'm just stupid because that was a lot to get through. Like I had to force myself to sit through it. And like, you could get into the characters and that's fine, but where's the punching and fighting and explosions like a dummy? Look at this image. That is absolutely beautiful. Now that's Hellshock book 2, The Milk of Paradise. Okay. Dramatic, dynamic, beautiful figure work, great highlights on the color. So I'm like, all right, this looks like we're going to get into some interesting shit in book 2. Like something's finally going to fucking happen. Right? Beautiful cover for book 2. And then there's just more beautiful artwork on the back. On the back cover of book 1, look at that beautiful drawing. Looks more like something from the original character, right? Even though nothing that looks like this is inside this book, even in the slightest, in 40-something pages. That guy and this guy are not in this book. I mean, the character is, but that version of him. So, remember how this was the cover to book 2? Well, there's book 2. There's the cover. Both are fantastic. Both are well drawn. But very different. This feels like what would have been the old Hellshock series. This feels like more in line with the shit we just got into. So what's in book 2? I can't say that I'm particularly in love with the color choices on the cover, although I don't think it's wrong or bad. I understand, especially in context of the book when we get into it, what this is representative of. It's the sky. So it's just, when you had this cover, both are great, but, you know, it's minor quibble. But Hellshock, book 2. So book 1 was January of 97. This is February 97. Remember Jae Lee said the books will it be monthly? Absolutely, he said. So we flip it open. Guess what? It's more people standing around talking with the goddamn quadrillion words to read. Drug dealers making horrible decisions, selling crack. More people talking, going on and on about the psychology of life and the patients and the indifference of the people caring for them. It goes on and on and on. Here is, I guess, the girl from the first book, Christina. She's at home with her roommate, and Christina is, after that gift she was given from the previous issue, that emotional cathartic release, she hasn't been back to work for 2 weeks, and she's been avoiding her boss. So her boss is like, you've got to show up to fucking work. Life sucks. You've got to deal with it. You've got to move on. Let's not have this conversation again. So then she's back wandering around in these settings, dealing with people mostly interested in the Daniel guy, in Hellshock. Again, beautiful artwork, incredible coloring, 50 quadrillion words to read. And it just keeps going. Sitting around talking. She's getting a little bit more interested in this Daniel guy. Something's up with him. I love all these faces. The coloring, the drawing, the inking. It's just so good there. But this Daniel guy, again, the only thing keeping me interested is that he's Hellshock. He's got connections to God or the devil. He's got some kind of thing. He's in this mentally ill hospital place where he's supposed to be in recovery. What is she going to discover about him? What is she going to have some kind of life-changing moment where some big epic quest? Like, I'm not making this up. This is what Jae Lee said in the book. He's talking about you will witness a conflict of cataclysmic dimensions where acts of great cruelty and blah, 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 blah. All this amazing shit. Well, 40-something pages into it, nothing happened. And then book 2, it's the exact same thing beginning to end. More character development, more building, more the girl trying to figure out her shit, and Daniel trying to get his head straight because he's got problems. Like, I sit here and think about the books I've reviewed from, like, Alan Moore, for example, when he's doing Tom Strong. How much information Alan Moore is able to convey in a script, in a few pages, in a few panels, and a few words, and you get everything you need to know. That's an example of compressed storytelling, but done flawlessly and perfectly. I think Warren Ellis does it too on Planetary. And then there's decompressed storytelling, where we see every waking moment and hear every word and thought that these characters have. And that's these books. And that's what Jae Lee, intentionally or unintentionally, was leaning into. But these characters are talking and talking and talking and going on. And she's fascinated by this Daniel guy. So because she's fascinated with him and trying to help him, she takes him back up to the roof again. There's goddamn beautiful coloring, and she's having a wonderful moment, and he stands up. They kind of embrace, and it says, "We leave all earthly things behind. We escape by flight on imaginary wings." So it's like he takes her and puts his arm around her and reaches for the heavens. Now, I'm going to say that this is a photo of some clouds in the background, which is fine. That's not painted in if I had to guess. But suddenly I'm like, oh, shit. What's this? What interesting thing is going to happen here? Is Hellshock with these otherworldly powers, is he there just to help her grow out of her struggles? Is he really struggling? Is she there to help him? But he puts his arm around her, reaches towards the heavens, and you get this incredibly beautiful double-page spread of them leaping off the edge of one of the buildings where they were at. You get, again, I'm going to guess this is maybe a photograph of a sky that they took. This great city shot. It's got that dark, gothic, inky vibe that Jae Lee does with these beautiful color palettes that Jose Villarrubia does. They leap off the edge of the building as if to take off to the heavens. Oh, shit. And that's the end of book 2. And there's a bunch of letters in here. People are hyping it up, so thrilled with what they got. So take what I've got to say about it with a grain of salt. I'm not saying it's bad. It's certainly a million miles more researched and thought and emotion and care put into it than the original one and a lot of other early Image books. And all these letters just love it. But, okay, all right, you end it on a hell of a cliffhanger, right? They're leaping off a building into the sky. And that's where it ends, with the beautiful spread. It's incredible. All right, book 3. Well, again, like I said, book 1 was January of 97. Book 2, February of 97. Book 3, January of 1998. A year later, Jae Lee gives us issue 3, and this is as far as he got. I remember distinctly, because I had a hold from my comics, whatever comic shop I was using at the time. And then just one day, a year later, there was book 3. This beautiful cover, this great drawing, this watercolor. I'm like, oh my God, there's another issue? I'm so fucking excited. What the hell happened? So I flip it open, written and illustrated by Jae Lee. Same paints. Art takes a distinct different approach. not a distinct, I guess. It's not as dark and scratchy and heavily inked. It's a little bit more open. Something different happened in between books 1 and 2 and then 3. Still looks good, but it's not the same. We're out of that fucking the psych ward, that freaking gothic castle that all these people are trapped in. Like, we're actually getting a city. It's raining. You got cops. They're looking. They're talking. And what they're investigating is basically when Daniel and Christina leapt off the building in the previous one, they just fell down and crashed down, and Daniel died. And Christina almost died. They didn't fly. They didn't take off. They didn't have a magical spiritual moment. They just fell, one of them to their presumed death. And so I'm like, oh, that was not what I was expecting. But what happens? We go back to people sitting around talking. And I honestly can't, I was struggling with this by this point. So you got this girl here who's sick and in this hospital, talking with other girl in coat. I'm sorry, I couldn't get into this story enough to read 10,000 more words. I think it's the same girl having a mental kind of break, professional her talking with normal version of her who's suffering. I think that's what's going on. And again, all these drawings are so beautiful. They're so well drawn, evocative, emotive, gestural. Jae Lee cares so much about what he does. But they're talking, and again, I think this is the same person having like an internal conversation with herself. I don't fucking know. It was so hard to like put myself back in this place. I'm like, we're still just having guys sitting around talking. The one interesting part was that they jumped off the roof, and what was going to happen? Well, they just fell. Nothing happened. All right, well, now they're talking like with the boss of the girl of the psych ward, and he's like, well, she's my responsibility. You know, now we're going to maybe have to admit her to the psych ward because there's manslaughter. She might have killed the guy. So they're sitting around and they're talking, and they're talking. And the artwork is so great. The coloring is so great. But they're talking and talking. And she's having a flashback to when they jumped off and, you know, reaching for the heavens, and then how they leaped into the sky. Great silhouette. More clouds, I'm guessing, are photographs that they, you know, put into the background. And they just fell. Like, Daniel's head was twisted in an angle that it shouldn't be. She's lying there bleeding out. Nothing happened. No magic. Nothing amazing happened. The reality of the harsh world is still there. And so she's just dealing with it. So then she's sitting here. Again, if I'm right, and it's just the same girl talking to herself. Professional her walks off and leaves. And so it says, oh God, where's a good place to kind of start to kind of get an idea of her last thoughts in this book here? I had become a child, a scared child, so scared I couldn't bear to deal with my own frailties. I chose instead to hide behind false hopes and miracle cures. A weak child, too weak to even try to find my way back home. I can only go forward and stumble along in the dark. I am so completely, utterly lost. So she walks down the tunnel, and then it ends with the girl pulled off some broken glass and slit her wrists, and she's dead. Like, what the fuck is going on? And so this is the part where you get all your explanation from Jae Lee, and this is the part that makes me feel bad for Jae Lee. I have a lot of sympathy for him. Because, again, this book, issue 3, is a year late. When he promised it would be monthly, he's like, fuck yeah, it's going to be monthly. I am going to hold myself to this standard, and I will produce work that can be respected and appreciated, and I will get it in your hands because you're my fans, and you're putting money into my pocket, and I'm going to respect you by giving you the work that you want. So what does he say here? He says, I don't even know where to begin. Yes, this book is late. I'd like to offer an apology, but I'm afraid it'll come across as insincere. I'd like to offer an explanation, but unless you know me, you really don't know what I've been up to. I love this book. I hate this book. Sometimes I feel this is the most satisfying work. Sometimes I blame it for killing my career. This book has become my life. I have rewritten the story so many times, it's appalling. This book is more personal than I'd care to admit. And when that happens, you just can't let it go. Nothing is going to be good enough. My hopes far exceed what I'm capable of doing, and that's a humbling experience. If I had my way, this book would probably never come out because I'd never write the perfect story or create the perfect vision. I'm just going to close my eyes, jump in with both feet, and wade around in this little mess I've made for myself and see what happens. Hellshock is my child. If you see him in the streets, please don't make fun of him. Please don't spit on him. Please don't beat him up. Just give him time to grow. So I read that and I was instantly like, oh, the poor guy. He's fucking suffering from like perfectionism paralysis. And back in 97, I didn't have any kind of concept of that. I was learning to draw and I wanted to make comics. But now for myself, 47 years old, making my own stuff, I do get it. You want it to be as perfect as you can get. But some people want it to be so perfect, they never move forward. And you get stuck. I know some people like this. I have a friend like this who, after all this time, has still never made not one goddamn thing. And he could make the most beautiful stuff if he wanted to, but he's stuck on making it perfect, and it just never goes anywhere. And I think there's a lot of people out there. So it's an understandable thing. The suffering artist, the creative guy who's trying to make something, and you know in your head what you want it to be, but what's in your head and what comes out on paper are sometimes so very different. And then you get the best that you could do onto paper, and you're like, but that's not even 75% of what I wanted. I just finished the art on 147 pages of my own fan comic I've been working on for the last year. And when I look at it, I'm happy with it, but there are many, many parts that are not quite as good as I envisioned it in my head. It's never going to be as good as I had it in my head. I'm not as good enough artist. I don't know how to do pacing the best way. I'm just an enthusiastic amateur. But once it's all put together and lettered and printed up and I get copies into people's hands, it becomes an entirely different thing. It becomes what it is to the reader. And sometimes with books, even though the creator thinks what they made is not good, to the person who reads it, it's completely perfect the way it was. I know there's a lot of books like that. I know, there's plenty of books and things that I've read where I'm like, this is absolutely perfect. If I could make this thing, I would personally be so happy. But then when you read interviews or watch interviews with the creators, they talk about how they're just disappointed in it and how they could have done better. So I get it. And there's no such thing as, I don't think you should ever be satisfied. You should never look at what you did and just go like, oh, it's perfect. It'll never be better. I mean, you might do an occasional thing here and there where you're like, oh, nailed it. Got it. Perfect. But, you're always striving. You're never going to get perfect, never going to get perfection. It's never going to be flawless to you, but to the person who's consuming your art, it's as good as it ever could possibly be to them. So I get it. Poor Jae Lee is just suffering. And this is 98. And this is, again, he talked about in the first issue and the backup thing that I'd read earlier, he said he had like 12 issues at least in his head. He never did another one. It's over. He said, I'm going to try. I'm going to just keep going. And he stopped. I don't know why. I don't know what his personal thoughts were, but you read this and you can probably just imagine him going like, I just need to draw comics for other people. He's probably happier that way. He probably makes a goddamn good living. And this is so emotionally taxing for him. It's driving him insane. He gave up. He surrendered. He put it aside, and he never did Hellshock again, to my knowledge. And again, to my knowledge, he never, ever has ever again attempted some creator-owned work. He's just drawing other stuff for other people, which is fine. That's respectable, but it kind of makes me sad to think of a guy who's this goddamn good, not wanting to do your own work. But that's just me. But then I'm also sitting here bitching about it because it's not the best way to go about this. it's 3 issues of people talking. It's like 60 pages, 40 pages in book 1 and maybe 20. So 40, 60, 80 pages maybe of people sitting around talking. Like, you've got to put something else into it. You've got to try harder than just like, you've got to do something different than what he did. Again, what do I know? No one's reading my comics. I'm not being paid by anybody to do any goddamn thing. I feel like I would think I was saying originally, that these are an amazingly respectable, beautiful attempt that succeeds in a lot of ways, but completely fails in others. It's like, you got to reformat the idea and make it a little bit more, it's got to move a little quicker. It's got to have a little bit more happening, a little bit more action, adventure, energy, something. It can't draw 80 pages of people sitting around talking to each other. You know, intersperse it in between. Give us character moments in between, something fun. It's just dour and dark and depressing and reading over and over and over all these words. And it just, I like Jae Lee. I respect him, but I really think he goofed up. But you can tell he put everything his heart and soul had into this. Everything he had is on the page, and you can respect the hell out of it, even if it didn't work out the way that it maybe could have. So this is a book I've been waiting to get to for a long time, because, again, I knew it was going to be a little bit of a slog to get through. We're approaching an hour, and it's like gathering my thoughts on this and how to explain it. I think it's an interesting concept. I bet if Jae Lee were to try and reformulate this thing and try it again and approach it with the same level of artistic skill, do a Kickstarter, I bet he'd be real successful. But I don't know, maybe he's just not interested. He hasn't tried to do it in the subsequent, 2 decades? He just, no interest. He's drawing whatever the hell else he wants, and he doesn't want to do his creator-owned work anymore, because it feels like it broke him. When you read that last little blurb in book 3, you feel like a broken man who tried so hard and in his own mind failed so miserably, and then he was just like, I'll just keep trying, and then he stopped. It's done, it's over, and he's got nothing more to say on it. And it's kind of sad, but I get it. So, Hellshock, beautiful artwork. Just, it could have been done better. But what do I know? I don't know shit. So, I hope you enjoyed this video. It's interesting. Jae Lee's great. And if nothing else, even if the story was boring as hell, goddamn is the artwork beautiful in this. It's incredible stuff. So, that is all I've got. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. I'd love to know anybody's thoughts on these, as always. So please sound off in the comments and tell me what you think. And I will see you on the next one. So thanks. Bye.